talk about how to survive the Socratic method in law school. So most law school professors, particularly first-year professors, will use the Socratic method when they teach class. Basically, they'll pick on a student and they'll ask the student questions over and over again. The idea behind the Socratic method is to ask questions until the student doesn't know the answer. So it's okay if you don't know everything. That's the whole goal of the Socratic method, to ask you questions until you don't know the answer. Here we're going to talk about some tips on how to survive the Socratic method in law school. Our first tip is to pay attention to how your professor picks on students. Some professors will pick on them completely randomly. Okay, this makes it hard to anticipate when you'll be on call, but they'll use like their attendance sheet or popsicle sticks or something and just pick on a student. Others will go up and down the rows, so they'll just, go kind of in order of students. You can somewhat anticipate when you'll be called on. Other professors will go alphabetically, and some professors will even let you schedule the days that you're on call. If you can schedule, then schedule wisely. Make sure that you're actually reading the material really well, those days that you are called on. The next tip is to relax. It is hard to do this. It's much easier said than done. But remember two important things about cold calls. First, no one is thinking about how you perform on call. Just like you don't really care how your friends perform on call, they don't really care how you perform on call. Everyone's too worried about themselves to really be thinking about you. So just do your best and don't overthink it too much. Next is your cold call will not influence your grade in virtually any law school class. Even if your professor gives extra points to those who volunteer, they're not giving you extra points for performing well on call. They're literally giving extra points for people who volunteer. So how well you perform on call will not affect your final grade. Your professor probably honestly won't even remember how you perform on call, and they might not even know your name, aside from calling on you. So don't worry too much about your on-call performance. Next, make sure that you prepare. The best way to defeat or at least diminish anxiety is to prepare well. If you're prepared, you're not going to feel so anxious when you're called on. We think that book briefing is the best way to prepare, so make sure that I would recommend reading a case brief and then going through your case book and then just briefly book briefing the issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, the holding, whatever types of things that your professor likes to ask about on call. And that way, if your professor asks you these questions, you can consult your case book and you'll know the answer. And that brings me to the next 2 points, which is first, look at your notes, look at your case book. You are not expected to memorize the cases. Your professor expects you to look down at your casebook or your notes when you're answering questions. That's very normal. So make sure that you're bringing it to class with you and that you have them, nicely tabbed or organized or highlighted or whatever so that you can easily find the information that you need. And it also brings me to the next point, which is make sure to pay attention to the types of questions your professor asks. For example, some professors will focus ridiculously on the facts, okay? They will ask you every little detail about the facts when you're on call. Other professors will barely ask about the facts at all. You might not even know the facts after going to class. And they'll focus more on the law or what the policy reasons behind the law or something like that. So pay attention to what your professor focuses on, and that'll help you better prepare for class and for the idea of being called on, because you'll be able to focus on that when you prepare. And then lastly, volunteer. The best way to get over anxiety or nervousness about being on call is to actually raise your hand and volunteer. And again, it's okay if you get the answer wrong. Your professor will greatly appreciate a volunteer. I know I've taught law school classes before, and it is very nice to have people who volunteer and raise their hand. It makes the class much more engaging. It makes the students engaged. So even if you don't know the exact right answer, or you don't say exactly what your professor is looking for, your professor will appreciate a volunteer. And it'll have the added bonus of helping you get over any anxiety you might feel about being called on or speaking in public.